On episode 175 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we welcome back Dr. Jason Fung and Jimmy Moore to discuss their new book, The Complete Guide to Fasting. You can find the full show notes to this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/175. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Dr. Jason Fung has treated thousands of obesity and type 2 diabetes patients and founded the Intensive Dietary Management Program. You may remember Dr. Fung from episode 77 when we discussed his first book, The Obesity Code. Jimmy Moore has written 3 books, Cholesterol Clarity, Keto Clarity, and The Ketogenic Cookbook, and is an uber popular podcaster with Livin' La Vida Low Carb Conversations, and Keto Talk. I've also had Jimmy on the show. You can check those out at episode number 23, 28, and 18. After the call recording stopped, Dr. Fung, Jimmy, and I kept talking. Disappointed we weren't recording, I wanted to get that to you, so I'm going to put some of that of what we talked about in the show notes. And you can find those show notes at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/175. I'd really encourage you to go out there and check those out because we had a really good, deep conversation after I stopped recording. And I am quite disappointed that we missed those. So with no further ado, here's Dr. Fung and Jimmy Moore. So Dr. Fung and Jimmy, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you.
Hey, man.
I am really excited to have both of you back on. Your episodes have been by far the most popular episodes that I've had out there and have really gotten the most interaction from folks. I really think that they've hit a spot that a lot of us need, when we're looking for weight loss and we're looking for health. I think you guys have nailed it in helping them understand what they need to do and how to do it. And in these books, and particularly this one, The Complete Guide to Fasting, really does walk someone through when they want to deal with these issues, how to go about doing it.
Thanks very much. I mean, I think it's an important area to cover because one of the things that we noticed was that there really was nothing out there, right? And that's what we said. We were like, oh, where can you go? I think Jimmy asked me this one day. He's like, oh,
Yeah.
what can I, where can I go to get a good book on? And I'm like, well, there's just nothing. Right. And then we're like, okay, then we got to write it. If it's not out there, then we got to put the information out there and give people the help that they need. Because honestly, it's something that has been a part of humanity, right? But it's been forgotten. It's been lost, right? And that's why we have to kind of help people, give them some tips and so on as to what to expect, how to do it properly, what the different options are. And that's really what we wanted to do. I use it fairly extensively in my clinical practice, but I know from talking to people that people have really zero idea of what is out there.
And it had to be a practical guide too. That was the big thing here. As you know, from my Clarity series, Cholesterol Clarity and Keto Clarity, we wanted to make it easy for people to understand so the patient could read this and go, okay, that sounds doable. Let's do this. And so that was why I wanted to collaborate with Dr. Fung on this to make it very user-friendly and yet still be backed by the science.
So Jimmy, we all basically fast, by not eating overnight. But these are not the kind of fast you're talking about exactly. You have different types of fast. So before we really get into the concept of fasting, can you kind of talk about the different types of fasting that are out there and those approaches?
Sure. And I would say that just about everyone that eats dinner, say at 6 o'clock at night, and then you don't have breakfast until 8 o'clock the next morning, guess what? Whether you liked it or not, you just intermittent fasted for 14 hours. And all we're saying with an intermittent fast is maybe push that a little longer. Maybe don't eat your breakfast meal. And I think the last time I was on the show, I said something to the effect of, they say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but I say that's true. It just doesn't have to be at 7 o'clock in the morning. So
yeah, well, McDonald's serves all day breakfast anyway. So now,
oh, that's true. That's true. Well, I hadn't.
That's
been
not
to
what we're
McDonald's
talking about. Yeah, that's not what we're talking about here. But yeah, just extending the amount of time you go between eating.
Yeah, and just that little bit of extra time fasting And of course, it's not an uncomfortable, you're not starving yourself, you're not hungry. You're just saying, you know what, I'm satisfied. I don't need to eat breakfast just because our culture tells us it's breakfast time. That's eating by the clock. And so pushing that a little bit longer, anywhere from 16 to even 24 hours, and that's a good intermittent fast. So that's what an intermittent fast is. And then you can do alternate day fasting, which is the other strategic way that we say to fast, where you eat on Monday, don't eat Tuesday, eat on Wednesday, don't eat Thursday. And it basically turns out to be about a 36-hour fast. I know Dr. Fung put in there also that you could push it to 42, as another strategy. And then these extended fasts, which you alluded to, that I've been experimenting with. I'm currently in day 11 of a proposed 21-day fast as we speak. So you can do them as short as 3 days. That would be an extended fast. Although from my experience, if you only do 3 days, why don't you go to 7? Because you put all the work in the first couple of days to get to there. Just you're going to enjoy the benefits if you push it a little bit longer than 3.
And while we're talking about your experience, I kind of wanted to get into that because I was fortunate enough to stalk you on Periscope, and you were nice enough to share a lot of what was going on when you were going through one of your extended fasts, and how once you get, and Dr. Fung has put this out there too, kind of once you get past day 2. This is actually going to get a little easier for you to maintain.
Incredibly easier, yes.
But there are things that can still trip you up. So could you take a little bit of time to kind of talk through the extended fasts, and then we'll kind of get into the benefits and some of the other things later. But I want to talk about kind of some of your experience with fasting, because that makes up a big part of the practicality of this book, of realizing this is not easy, but it's not hard. You have to have a certain mindset and a certain approach. So could you take some time to go through that?
Absolutely. And some people say, well, you have such great willpower. I'm like, I used to weigh 410 pounds in my life. If I had great willpower, that would have never happened. So no, I do not have great willpower. But Dr. Fung actually nails it in the book when he says, as you're going through these longer fasts, you're gonna have a lot of head games start to play with you, and you gotta kind of ride the waves of the hunger that come. And in riding those waves, you just have to know there's going to be moments when you think your body's telling you you're hungry. And what I found in my own experience doing these fasts is it's only a fluttering, I would say seconds to minutes, that you kind of feel that way. And if at any point you feel like totally bad, the thing that we're communicating very clearly is in the fast, there's no need being a hero trying to push through pain. Should never be painful when you're fasting. And what it should be is an enjoyable experience, and realizing that you have a goal in mind. My goal in mind in doing these fasts is to help heal some of the insulin resistance that made me 410 pounds to begin with. And I think it's doing that, and it's going to be a cumulative effect over time. But the biggest thing, and one of the things that has sabotaged me the most, and I would definitely encourage anyone that goes on an extended fast, if you have plans to travel or have any kind of stressful situation, like your mother-in-law coming to visit you or something, I'm just kidding, I love my mother-in-law, but anything like that, then you probably want to make sure you build your fast around that so that you don't have to go through that stressful experience. Because stress was probably my biggest killer when I first started to do these extended fasts, and it ended it. So it will raise your blood sugar. I actually gained 3 pounds in the last 2 days of a 17.5-day fast just from the stress of travel. So it can be a beast, and definitely just be aware of that.
Now, Dr. Fung, obviously when I tell someone I'm fasting, which is actually a tip you have in the book, don't tell anyone you're fasting. But when you do talk about fasting, a lot of times, and I guess Jimmy supposes it is the F word, but when you use that, a lot of people start pulling out all these things that they're going to tell you you're doing terrible things to your body. You're causing eating disorders and all this other stuff. Could you kind of go through some of these concepts, these myths, effectively, of fasting?
This is very important, because getting back to what the previous question is, that this is normal, right? Fasting is normal. That's what you got to understand, okay? Fasting is merely the flip side of eating, okay? When you don't eat, you fast. So you want the feeding and the fasting to be balanced, right? But if you want to lose weight, you want to emphasize the fasting. The problem we've done is that we've emphasized the feeding. We tell people, eat the minute you get up, and don't stop eating until the minute you go to bed. And then it's like, why am I gaining weight? Well, you should throw in a few more snacks. I'm like, okay, that just sounds really dumb, right? Because you're not going to lose weight by eating. It just doesn't happen that way, right? The point is that this is a natural phenomenon. You're supposed to do this all the time. The very word itself, breakfast, tells you that, right? You can't break your fast if you're not fasting. So if you never fast, you can't break your fast. So therefore, the word implies that this is a part of every single day life. It's not some weird, unusual punishment that we've thrown out there, right? And that's what people have to understand. It's totally normal. So what happens when you fast is that you're simply letting your body use up some of the food energy that you've stored up through the day. So when you eat, you store some body energy. You store the energy because you're eating more than you can use at that moment. And when you fast, you burn it up. And that's it. So if you want to lose weight, you want to extend the time that you fast. So everybody has these weird ideas about, oh, you're going to cause anorexia. I mean, there's a context, right? If you are a 16-year-old girl who weighs, 85 pounds, yes, you should not be fasting, right? It's not something you should do deliberately other than your normal kind of 12 to 14-hour fast, right? But on the other hand, if you are 400 pounds and have type 2 diabetes, then it may be a very good idea, right? So there is a context, obviously, and everybody says, oh, you said everybody should fast. Well, what about my, 15-year-old anorexic girl who weighs 30 pounds? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking about, right? So you can't take these things out of context, and that's what everybody tries to do. But what we are dealing with when we talk about fasting is those people who need it, right? If you need to lose weight, and there's a huge number of health reasons why you should. Polycystic ovarian disease, fatty liver disease, which is going to be the leading cause of liver disease, diabetes, leading cause of heart disease, leading cause of stroke, leading cause of blindness, leading cause of amputations. I'm like, okay, look at all these problems. Virtually half of our medical problems today are related to diabetes and obesity, collectively called the metabolic syndrome. And those people can be helped by fasting. So it's an option, right? So, one, it's a normal phenomenon, right? It's simply the absence of eating. Normal. The second thing is that you have to choose the one you want to do it in, right? So there are people who shouldn't fast, and we go over this as well. And we talk about when you have to be careful and so on in the book. And then three, if there are reasons why you should fast, then you should do it. Remember that anorexia is a psychiatric disorder of body image distortion, right? It's not when you don't eat, you're anorexic, right? That's not it. That's the same thing as saying, I told my son to wash his hands. And it's like, wow, why you shouldn't do that? You might make them obsessive compulsive. It's like, no, you're not going to make them obsessive compulsive. You ask them to wash their hands, right? Fasting's the same. I asked you not to eat. I didn't give you a body image disorder. Okay. It's like ridiculous. But the problem is that these really crazy, crazy notions get out there. Somebody says it and everybody starts nodding their head. Yeah, you're causing eating disorders. Like, no, we're not causing eating disorders. We're presenting it as a therapeutic option for those people who want to, because the truth is, if you cannot lose weight, and honestly, if you don't eat, you're going to lose weight, right? So nobody says that it doesn't work, right? That's the one. There's a lot of complaints. A lot of people complain about stuff. But the one thing they don't complain about is that it doesn't work. It does work, right? Everybody knows it. It simply is not logical that it couldn't work. So this is the thing. For those people, if you cannot get their weight under control, they will have a lot of health issues, right? Leading cause of liver disease, kidney disease, heart disease, stroke, cancer. Come on. I mean, we can make those all better. And you don't have to fast. We don't go out there and says everybody has to do a 17-day fast, right? We say, look, there's all these options. You can do it whatever way you want to, or you can not do it at all. I don't really care, right? But if you have a goal of losing weight, or if you have a goal of reversing your type 2 diabetes, if you have a goal of reversing prediabetes, then hey, this is an option for you. Whether you take it or not, I'm not telling you to do anything, right? But to throw away the option is ridiculous. And this is the thing. People have done it for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Every religion does it. Do you think so? For example, we just went through Yom Kippur and it's a fasting day, right? So do you think all the Jewish rabbis, they're trying to kill off and give eating disorders to their entire congregation? It's like, no, they're not. Okay, the holy month of Ramadan, you think that the Prophet Muhammad was trying to give eating disorders to millions of people around the world? That was his goal? No, I don't think so, right? In Easter time, I when I go to church, they talk about fasting all the time during Lent and Ash Wednesday and so on. Do you think my pastor is trying to give eating disorders and kill off his parishioners? No, I don't think so. So these ideas are like, when you put them to logic, they're actually completely ridiculous, right? It's a normal, everyday part of life that we've lost, and we've gone too far the other way, and now we want to move it back towards being acceptable and being an option for you.
One of the complaints that come out, and I want to ask this in this context, Jimmy's not destroying his metabolism by being in an extended fast like this, is he?
Yeah, this is the most ironic thing. So when they talk about starvation mode, and this is probably either the number one or the number two thing that comes up. The number one or two thing comes up is the starvation mode. Second is this burning muscle business. So about starvation mode, what they talk about is this reduction in basal metabolism. Okay, and this is the number of calories that you burn in a day. So if you eat 2,000 calories and your weight is stable, you're burning roughly 2,000 calories, right? That's how you stay stable. Starvation mode is the idea that your body will reduce itself to a lower number of calories burned, and then you're going to feel cold and you're going to feel tired and going to feel lousy, but you're going to gain weight because you're simply burning less off. And this actually happens. And it's been known for close to 100 years that the way to do that is to follow a restricted calorie diet. Okay. So if you simply restrict your calories by 30%, your body will burn 30% less. Why? It's not stupid, right? If you earn $100,000 and spend $100,000, then all of a sudden you earn $50,000, you reduce your spending. Well, this is what happens to the body, right? It doesn't want to run a caloric deficit, right? Because it's going to die, right? If it spends all its calories on useless stuff, it's going to die, right? That's what's going to happen. Suppose you eat 1,500 calories and you expect the body to keep burning 2,000 calories, right? This is what everybody tells you. Oh, you're going to lose a pound a week. So in a year, you're going to lose 50 pounds. In 4 years, you're going to lose 200 pounds. You'll weigh 0 pounds or negative 2 pounds. It's like, okay, that's just ridiculous. The body has to reduce its caloric expenditure at some point. Turns out that point is almost right away. Almost right away, it reduces its calorie expenditure. So if you simply try to portion control, you guarantee, and again, the science has been proven for 100 years, you guarantee you will go into starvation mode. Guaranteed. Okay? And every single study shows this. When they looked at the Biggest Loser study, this was recently in the New York Times, and what they found was that these people who went on these caloric restricted diets, their metabolism went way down. On average, they dropped about 780-ish calories a day. That's how much less they were burning each and every day. 700 plus calories each and every day. And it persisted for like 6 years. That's why they couldn't gain weight. That's why they couldn't keep that weight gain off, right? Because they're burning so little. And this is what happens to everybody. You feel like crap because you're tired, you're cold, you're hungry, and you're gaining the weight back. And then everybody points the finger at you, says, oh, you're off your diet. No, it was because your body went into starvation mode, right? But what doesn't put you into starvation mode is actual starvation. And this is the fascinating thing. When you eat zero or very close to zero, your body doesn't simply shut down, because if it did, you'd be dead. If we were cavemen and we're in the winter and there was nothing to eat and every day you got a little weaker, you'd never catch that rabbit, right? So your body is not that stupid. What it does is it actually switches fuel sources. So instead of burning food, it burns fat. And then it gives you more energy. So noradrenaline goes up. And these are the hormonal changes that you find with fasting that you do not get with calorie restriction. Your growth hormone goes up, which maintains your lean mass. Your noradrenaline goes up, which gives you energy, and you start burning fat. So you see all this fatty acid, ketones go up, fatty acids in the blood go up. Your body is flooding yourself with energy. So if you fast for 4 days, and they've done the study, so 4 days of fasting, your basal metabolism is actually 10%, it's actually 12% higher than when you started. You're burning more energy at the end of 4 days of zero food than you did when at the beginning, right? So you're not going into starvation mode. Your actually body is pumping you full of energy so you can go out and hunt that woolly mammoth and get some food into your belly, right? Because that's how you're going to survive. You're never going to survive if you got weaker and weaker every single day. So if you look at studies of alternate daily fasting, so people have done this as well. Every other day they fasted. At the end of 70 days, their metabolism was not different. So they were burning the same number of calories at the beginning of that 70 days. You didn't go into starvation mode. And that's key because that's what causes the weight regain. That's the reason people cannot lose weight cannot stop the weight from coming back on is this slowdown, the metabolic slowdown. So if you do a calorie restricted diet, you're guaranteed to get that weight back. And we all know it, right? 99% of people fail. But when you do the intermittent fasting, you've given yourself a huge advantage, not for the weight loss necessarily for the first little bit, but to prevent that weight regain. And that's what's important, the long term, not the short term, 6 months. Everybody knows in 6 months, any diet will do fine. But in the long term, that's what's been successful. And then you look back and you say, wow, well, have people been doing it throughout human history? Yes. Have people been doing calorie restriction, this portion control idea throughout history? No, I don't think so, right? They've done it in the last 50 years. Who's even heard of calories before 50 years ago? Nobody. Nobody counted calories. They didn't even know what it was, right? So, these ideas have been around a long time. And it's very powerful because it gives you the tools that you need to keep that weight from coming back on. And the other thing I forgot to mention is the part about hunger, which is totally fascinating because again, we have this inherent bias that eating more will make you less hungry. That's not actually true. Because what happens during fasting, and you can measure ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, and they've done a study where they compared alternate daily fasting to kind of daily restriction of calories. So it wasn't the calories were unequal. One of them ate far less, the fasting group ate far less. When you measure the ghrelin levels, when you simply restrict calories, ghrelin goes up. When you do the fasting, despite the fact that you're eating less total calories, your ghrelin does not. So what's the implication of that? Well, if you portion control yourself, you're going to be more hungry than if you do the fasting. In other words, you're going to be more hungry. You're going to want to eat. In the long term, that's not sustainable because hunger is, one of our most powerful drives, instincts, right? So you can't fight it forever. And that's why people will regain it because they're hungry, not because they have no willpower, because their hormones are actually driving them to be more hungry and to eat. But that's what you do not get with fasting. And that's what's really fascinating about it. So you've got giving yourself two incredible advantages, which is scientifically proven. You're going to have less of this metabolic slowdown and you're going to be less hungry. So we see this in clinic all the time. All the patients come in and they say, doc, I thought I'd be like really, really hungry all the time. I can't eat anything. I eat like a third of what I eat and I'm totally full. And I'm like, that's great. Now you're working with your body to lose weight instead of working against your body, right? And that's really important. If you look at fasting, this is just getting back to what Jimmy said about the extended fast, if the ghrelin, the hunger hormone, peaks at day 2. Every day after that, it goes down, right? Because what's happening when you fast is that it's not so much that you want food. Your body is eating. Your body is eating a meal of its own body fat. So then it's like, well, why do I need more? I'm not hungry because I have lots. That's how these Gandhi and some of these people did those extended hunger strikes because their body was essentially eating its own fat. And that's perfect because now, because you're eating your own body fat, you're not as hungry and your body is going to burn that 2,000 calories, the same metabolic rate. So again, very, very powerful hormonal changes, because again, this is what I go through in my first book, The Obesity Code. We've totally misunderstood obesity. We think of it as a caloric imbalance, but it's not. It's actually a hormonal imbalance. And that's why Jimmy's talking about insulin resistance and these hormones. It's these hormones that have gone thrown out of whack. That's what you have to correct, not the calories, because you know what? We've done that for 50 years. It's been a total disaster.
Alan, can I piggyback on something he said there? Because he noted that when you eat low calorie versus all out fasting, you actually do better on pure fasting. And I actually can personally attest to that. I did what's called a fat fast, where most of your calories come from fat, like 90%, and the rest from protein and carbohydrate. And I was far more hungry eating 1,200 calories of a fat fast than I am right now in the midst of not eating anything at all now for 11 days. So it's powerful and it's counterintuitive. You know, people would say, well, if you're taking food in, obviously that's a lot better than if you're not taking any food in at all. But because of all the things that Jason just mentioned, you're able to be completely normal and fine. And that's the one thing I want people to know. When you're deep into a fast, and of course you may not need to go as long as I have, but however long you go into a fast, you're gonna be okay. Let me tell you, as somebody who's been there a few times now, you're gonna be okay. And I want that to be clearly stated, that this isn't something to be feared. You should just embrace it. Come to the dark side.
Well, Jimmy, it's funny because, you've really shaped a lot of who I am as a person. And I want to thank you for that. I found cholesterol clarity when I first started working on, getting myself healthy, lost about 25 pounds. And then you got Keto Clarity came out and I read that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. Lost another 25 pounds. And so what I found was when I'm in ketosis, intermittent fasting just actually happens. You wake up in the morning, you get busy doing something, you get out the door, you go to work, you sit there and you work the day, and then it's 4:00 and you're like, did I eat today? And it's like, no, I didn't bring any food. I didn't think to bring food. And I didn't think about food at all. And now it's evening time. I'm going to go home and have dinner with my wife. Maybe I can afford to have an extra portion of this or that because I haven't eaten all day, but I'm going to stay in ketosis so I can experience what I'm feeling here. So the fasting naturally happened. Now, you're a professional faster is kind of how I'd categorize you today.
I'm getting there.
No, I think you're one of the world champions at this point. But kind of talk us through, because I think you talk about your story of some stumbling early on and then kind of getting your feet under you, so to speak. And the protocols that are shared in the book are just perfect. And I'm really glad those are in there because it really kind of talks people through. And there's even recipes in here for when you're going to get ready for your fast and when you're going to come off of your fast. And then, of course, you use bone broth. So I want to kind of let you just kind of tell your story of how you went through this and why you're using bone broth and now the things you've learned and how you apply them.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we go back a decade ago. I thought even the mention of fasting, even in an intermittent setting, was the stupidest thing in the world. And I tell this story in the book that I just was not a fan. And it took me a long time, despite interviewing literally every expert in the whole world, all about health and diet and all these concepts. Just the word fasting was just another F word to me because I couldn't imagine. Of course, this comes from a man who used to drink 16 cans of Coca-Cola a day, eat whole boxes of Little Debbie snack cakes a day and fast food. I mean, it was a normal part of my life to eat. And oh yeah, by the way, if I forgot to eat, I ate some more. So that's kind of the context from where I came. And so when you start saying don't eat, it just kind of throws a monkey wrench in everything. Of course, 2006, when I first started kind of thinking about this stuff, I was only 2 years away from my original weight loss. So I had not wrapped my head around how the body could naturally start to do this. And it wasn't until I went fully ketogenic that I was able to naturally do it. And so, yeah, I had a lot of ups and downs, made a lot of mistakes. The biggest mistake was the first time I ever tried a 1-week fast. After hearing Dr. Thomas Seyfried on my podcast mention that if you fasted for just 1 week a year, you could help to prevent cancer. And I was like, whoa, that sounds intriguing. But I don't like fasting. So once I kind of got up to that level of 1 week, I got to the seventh day, and Jason will laugh at me about this, but the seventh day, I actually took communion at church. So those of you that don't know what communion is, it's a little wafer cracker and a little thing of juice. And I had no food in my body for 6.5 days at that point. Was that wise, Jason?
Well, I mean, it is what it is, right?
It is what it is. So what happened was
know,
I got hypoglycemia very predictably. And that was the crash and burn of that particular first attempt at going a week. Drinking diet soda, which Jason and I, in our new book, are advocating people take in diet soda as part of this. It actually can trigger a lot of things, hunger specifically, and cravings, which is exactly what you don't want to have happen during a fast. Nowadays, as of last year, when I met Jason in South Africa and we started talking about doing this book, and I started talking about wanting to experiment a little longer, he had said, why don't you try using bone broth to help you through it? So I actually added bone broth with sea salt. And I even did this thing called kombucha, which is a fermented tea, in my experiments last year and into January this year. Well, this particular fast I'm on now, I'm not doing anything at all other than water. And I've had 1 cup of bone broth on day 5. That's it. And so I think you kind of build up the muscle, so to speak, to fast the more you do it. And I don't want anybody to just say, whoa, I could never do 21 days. Maybe you don't need to do 21 days, but if you do need to do 21 days, you're not going to do it on day 1. You don't go from Pee-wee football to the NFL. You kind of have to work your way up and get stronger and have more resolve. And I find that that's exactly what's happened for me the more that I've done these. And this is actually second nature to me now. I don't even think about that I haven't eaten. I don't think about that there's bacon smell in the air right now because my wife had bacon for breakfast. It doesn't bother me because I'm actively in control, choosing to fast. This isn't starvation. I'm not starving myself. I am making a conscious effort to not eat food with the sole purpose of healing insulin resistance. So that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. Again, I just really appreciated your story, and I appreciated that I was able to kind of follow you on Periscope as you were doing this. And again, being in ketosis, I kind of found myself just naturally getting into the intermittent fasting mode, which really helped. It helped a lot. And
it's so easy.
Yeah, we see this all the time too, because we see that people who go from kind of a high carbohydrate sort of a meal to fasting just have a hell of a time, right? But the people who are fairly low carb, I mean, you don't have to be ketogenic, but fairly low carb already, they do very, very well. And I think that the reason is that once you're adapted to the fat burning, then your body switches over to body fat and says, hey, that's the same thing, right? Whether it's fat in your food or fat on your body, it's all the same to the body, right? They're all fatty acids. So then it's easy. So it's already been developed, and it's kind of like a muscle in that sense, because you can actually see, the studies have actually shown that if you look at muscle cells, they will actually upregulate the genes and have more of the products needed to burn muscle when you fast or go ketogenic, for example. So your muscles are actually more efficient at using the fatty acids the more you use them. And this is the sort of keto adaptation that they talk about with endurance athletes when they try to become fat adapted, right? There's actual physiologic differences. So yes, it's a lot easier once you become adapted. And that's why for the people who are ketogenic, the fasting is fairly simple, and they don't actually have many problems going right into it.
I know I didn't experience any when I am in ketosis. It's just a natural day-to-day occurrence where if I'm not hungry, I don't eat, and that tends to be about once a day. And I think your whole ghrelin cycle, that works as well, because if I am going to be hungry, it tends to be more towards the evening as I approach the dinner time. I know we don't talk meal times, but generally once I get into the evenings, that's when I'm going to find myself getting hungry, or at least thinking about food a little bit more so than I would any other part of the day. And part of that's like you have tips in the book about not allowing yourself to get bored and some of those other things that are going to make you kind of slip up on this. But the tips and the guides, everything that's in this book is just incredible. And I really appreciate what you guys have done to share this with us. And I want people to, if they're going to consider a fast at all, this is the book that's going to help you do it. You've got the guides for intermittent fasting, for some of the more extended day-to-day fasting or alternate day fasting, and then again, the more extended fasts that Jimmy is currently on. So I'm going to have a link to the book in the show notes, but is there any other place you guys would like for me to send them to learn more about you or to learn more about fasting?
I think the other place, I mean, I have a website they can go to. It's www.intensivedietarymanagement.com. But another place that has a fantastic resource for intermittent fasting is Diet Doctor. So if you don't know the site, you need to know the site, right? It's www.dietdoctor.com. Has tons of great low carb recipes. And now also I've worked with Dr. Ian Felt there's a intermittent fasting page. It has links to a lot of articles that have been written about it. And there's just a lot of resources in a very easy kind of practical way so that it's not really hard to understand. But if you want more science, you can link to it and get more science if you want it. So it's probably the best resource that I can think of on the web right now for people. It's a great way to get information or recipes for when you're not fasting. So it's really terrific.
And the big thing that I see that people need when they start on a fast is, hey, is anybody else out there doing this with me? So there's an awesome Facebook page that was actually inspired by Jason called Fung Shui, Shweigh. And I'm an active part there, obviously. And so that's a really good resource. You'll find all sorts of people doing everything from just short-term intermittent fasts all the way to crazy people like myself doing these longer fasts. And so that's an amazing resource for support. And then, of course, if you want to follow some of the videos that I've done, I'm sharing basically on a daily basis my journey doing a lot of these fasts. Go to periscope.tv/livinglowcarbman.
Okay, awesome. Again, I'll make sure to have those in the show notes. This is going to be episode 175. And so you can find those show notes at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/175. Again, Dr. Fung and Jimmy, thank you so much for being a part of this program and all that you do to help people with their health and fitness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Was that not an amazing conversation? This has been one of my favorite podcast interviews, and I do hope you'll share it with folks that you think would benefit from it, because I think a lot of people are going to get value out of what we talked about today. So please do share this with someone. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, I share my best time management tips. Don't have time to get in the gym? Don't have time to cook good food? Well, these time management tips will help you find the time to do those things. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.